Bevor wir mit dem Video beginnen, hier nochmal ein Hinweis. Und zwar The Warden The Paunch gibt es jetzt bei Instant Gaming günstiger als bei Steam, nämlich für 6,69 €. Und ihr tut dabei auch noch den Kanal unterstützen. Den Link dafür, den tue ich ganz nach oben in die Beschreibung. Und jetzt viel Spaß mit dem Video. Und let's go.
The Warden Eltharion and the Paunch have arrived, bringing new lords and units to both the High Elves and Greenskins rosters. We're going
Ja, hier seht ihr übrigens Eltharion ohne Reittier.
to take a close-up look at all said units, including their stats and abilities, and talk about what their role may be within the army. We're going to kick it off with the Greenskins, so here we go. Big boy Grom the Paunch. He is a chariot lord. He's got lots of armor and is very fast at 84 speed.
Da ist er. Grom der Wanst. Das mit den Ringen, das ist ja ein bisschen komisch. Die sind irgendwie, das sieht so aus, als ob die nicht richtig angesteckt sind. Und ihn wird man nur benutzen können mit einem Streitwagen, anders nicht.
And he doesn't have a ton of melee attack, but that's probably because of his charge bonus, which is massive at 90. And he also doesn't have a ton of melee defense, but that's because he's a chariot and they never do. Weapon strength isn't too bad, not armor piercing though, does have a bonus versus infantry, so he's really all about running down that infantry. And for his abilities, first of all, he has regeneration. So Grom is actually pretty tough because he's a chariot, which is hard to catch, and he has regeneration, so he can be difficult to kill. He also has Language of the Boys, which is a 30-second augment to himself and nearby units, which increases melee defense by 5, leadership by 4, and gives an immunity to psychology.
Wisst ihr, was mir aufgefallen ist? Und zwar in der Lore ist er eigentlich ein bisschen grünlicher. Hier haben sie das anders gemacht. Und eigentlich ist sein Goblin Niglet, der ist eigentlich immer mit auf dem Streitwagen rumgefahren. Das haben sie hier nicht gemacht, dass der mit auf dem Streitwagen mit daneben rumsitzt, mit dem Banner von Gorm. Das haben sie hier nicht gemacht. Also Gorm fährt hier wirklich nur alleine auf seinem Streitwagen.
Only active when he's in melee though, so that's a nice support ability, could make him good at charging around in front lines, supporting his boys at the same time.
Aber dafür hat er ja die süßen kleinen Hunde.
And he has the Greaton is Ear, which is another augment, 20 seconds this time, affects allies, plus 16 leadership, plus 30 base damage, and plus 24 melee attack. So another really nice support ability, making Grom more than just a chariot. For his items, he has the Axe of Grom, which will increase his damage but reduce his armor, and the Lucky Banner, which gives him plus 40 melee attack and 40 damage resistance for 30 seconds, making him potentially even more tanky. He also comes with a wolf mount option.
Wenigstens hat er Regeneration.
Only joking, that would be ridiculous. Now onto this BBW with her enchanting skull bikini.
Ja, das ist diese Trollhexe, die ihr braucht, um die Zutaten zu bekommen in Groms Kampagne. Und die kann gleichzeitig auch die Lehre der Todesmagie, wie wir hier sehen.
The giant river troll hag is a new hero for the Greenskins, and she is primarily a death caster. Her melee stats aren't fantastic, but she does have some armor piercing damage, so she could do alright against some lighter troops that won't hurt her too much. But she's mostly really all about her magic and her abilities. She has life leeching for extra recharge rate, swamp breath, which is a magic missile where she's basically just sick on people, and mither, which is a 15-second hex which reduces speed and charge speed by 72%, which is pretty significant. And for her items, she has another magic missile and a bombardment spell. So a really nice addition to the Greenskins roster, finally gives you the death magic outside of having to bring Azag, and that speed reduction spell Mither could be incredibly powerful if used at the right moment. You might be able to catch a lord and put some serious damage on them. So yeah, she's happy with her tree and bag of fish.
Was sagt ihr zum Preis? Die ist ganz schön teuer für einen Helden, ne? Also ich finde die ganz schön teuer.
Now, if you're someone who's recently thought, God, I need more trolls in my life, then allow me to introduce you to the river trolls. They are similar to normal kinds of trolls, except they're a bit more defensive. They have higher melee defense and overwhelming odor, which is an ability that reduces enemy melee attack by 6. Not to mention the usual troll regeneration, so that's going to help them survive a little bit better, and also to help nearby friendly troops survive better because all the nearby enemies will have reduced melee attack. So a slightly different play on your usual damage dealer troll. Now they're a bit more supportive and defensive.
Ich finde, die sehen sehr geil aus, gerade mit den Stacheln und so. Also, es hat schon was.
Probably still best mixed in with infantry though. And then we have the Swamp Things, who are a regiment of renowned version of the River Trolls. They come even tougher with 50 melee defense, a bit more melee attack, same weapon strength, but they do have poison as well, so that's going to take away from the enemy as well, debuff them a little bit. Still got that overwhelming odor, and they do cause terror as well.
Ja, die sehen natürlich noch gleich viel geiler aus.
So a similar role, just a little bit more useful, especially
Whoa.
with that terror. And if you really can't get enough of trolls, then you've still got the stone trolls to look forward to as well. Honestly, these are basically the same as regular trolls, but they now have 70 armor, so they're going to be much tougher, and they hit harder with 120 armor-piercing weapon strength. So just normal trolls, but far better at the job of being a troll. Now to the other big fella that everybody's been waiting for besides
Der Götze.
Grom, the Rogue Idol. This big bag of rocks has more health than a Dread Saurian at 12,000 and 150 armor, so it is all in all a big damage soak. And as one might expect, it doesn't have a lot of melee defense. It does have a ton of weapon strength, which is armor piercing though, anti-infantry as well, and decent melee attack. So this thing does well, charging around in infantry, smashing all kinds of infantry to pieces, but because of its low speed, it can be a little bit vulnerable to any anti-large single monsters that may come after it, like a Necrosphinx or a Carnosaur. He'll be able to throw down and have a fight with those, but he doesn't have the option of trying to outrun them. And of course, he causes fear and terror as well. But where he really gets interesting is in his abilities. Spirit of Gork, or Mork, is a constant augment that gives +4 leadership map-wide to all units. Unless the Rogue Idol drops below 25% health, then it's disabled. He also has Rubble and Ruin, which is a 3-stage ability. A bombardment that will hurt both enemies and allies, and will allow him to do more damage but at the expense of his armor a little bit. The first stage happens when he drops below 75% health, the second stage when he gets below 50% health, and the third stage when he drops below 25% health, where he'll also cause rampage on that final one as well. So he'll drop 3 stages, 3 bombardments over the course of his life if he gets to those health markers. So overall, just an absolute tank with some heavy damage output. If that didn't sound terrifying enough for you, then...
Ja, das ist jetzt die Regiments of Raynon-Version davon und die hat auch nochmal ein Geschoss. Also der kann mit etwas werfen auf Mauern und Regimenter und so weiter. Also der kann Wurfschaden machen.
Maybe the Biggin will do the job. The regiment of renowned version of the Rogue Idol. Basically the same, a little increase to leadership, melee attack and melee defense. But his big selling point is that he has a ranged attack. He will throw a massive rock and just ding some fools in the dome. Or just, you know, completely crush their head and body and everything else. So basically a new artillery piece for the Greenskins, much like a Cygor for example for the Beastmen, although unlike the Cygor this one is actually pretty damn good and strong in melee. He's also the people's champion as he has an ability called Rock Bottom, which will allow him to replenish his ammunition, although it will cost him some health.
Ja, also so gesehen wie ein Cygor, nur dass er hier eben sich besser verteidigen kann wie ein Cygor, ne? Also er ist sozusagen mobile Artillerie und Draufschläger, eins in eins zusammen.
So death on rocky legs. And lastly, we have various kinds of Snotling Pump Wagon, a war machine that is kind of chariot-ish, but is all about being a disruptive nuisance most of the time. Their combat stats aren't fantastic, but they do have armor-piercing damage and a bonus versus infantry and a reasonable charge bonus, so they can get some damage done. And they do have an ability, Pump Harder Lads, which activates when they're charging, increasing their speed, and charge bonus, as well as their knockback, so they'll knock units around more easily. So they really gain the benefits of charging around, not staying in combat for too long, especially with their terrible melee defense. And they are an expendable unit, so it doesn't matter too much if they die, they're not going to affect leadership. Overall, a nice disruption chariot type unit for a bargain cost. If you'd like to invest more in your Snotlings though, you could go for the Flappers version, which has...
Ja, nicht wundern, das sind Snotlinge, also keine Goblinge und Snotlinge, das sind sozusagen die Vorgänger von den Goblins, also es sind die niedrigsten Grünhäute, die es gibt.
Some increased combat stats, mainly that charge bonus, 80, which is pretty huge.
Aber sie sehen doch wirklich wunderschön aus.
They're also a little bit faster as well at 70 speed. They also have Strider, so very much the same deal, just better at the job. They'll be harder to catch with their extra speed, and they'll do more damage with that considerably increased charge bonus. And for a regiment of renown, Logie Bogies, Spore Sploders, of course. More similar to the first pump wagon, not so much in the charge bonus, but more melee defense and melee attack. Their big thing though is that they have exploding fungi going on all of the time. So when they're charging in, they'll cause explosions, which is just going to add to the disruption that these little bastards can cause. So very much the same as the first one, just a little bit more dramatic with the explosions and potentially more damaging. And lastly for the greenskins, the Snotling Pump Wagon Spiky Rollers. A bit more use against those armoured targets as they cause armour sundering, so minus 30 armour for 10 seconds for whoever they hit. So a bit more useful and purposeful in this case, but they are the most expensive of the bunch. That is all the new greenskins units on the roster that Grom is bringing to the table.
Ja, also diese Wagen, die gibt es eben in 3 verschiedenen Variationen und haben natürlich auch alle unterschiedliche Einsatzmöglichkeiten und Kosten und so weiter.
Now to the High Elves then, with Eltharion the Grim. He is
Ja, jetzt kommen wir zu den Hochelfen, Eltarion the Grim. Hier sehen wir ihn zu Fuß. Einige finden, er sieht zu sehr wie ein normaler Elfenfürst aus. Ich weiß nicht, ich finde ihn jetzt eigentlich ganz okay so, aber Gorm ist doch ein bisschen besser.
the hybrid melee and caster lord.
Und wir sehen hier übrigens, er kann die komplette Hochelfenlehre. Und zwar die hohe Magie. Und hat dazu noch einen Speer und ein Schwert.
His combat stats are pretty damn good, on par with being a damage dealer, although he lacks armor piercing damage on his weapon strength, so that does hold him back a little bit. For his magic, he's got the high lore book, so lots of damage spells, a little bit of healing. And for his abilities, he's got the Shield of Safari, which is a ward save, gives 11% damage resistance map-wide for 9 seconds, activated when he's casting. And he also has Mistwalkers' Barrage, which is basically just a bombardment that only has a 30-second cooldown mind. And for his items, Fang Sword of Eltharion, a 31-second augment to himself which gives magical damage, 25% armor piercing damage and a 44% physical resistance. And his other item, the Helm of Ivresse, is a 17-second augment that makes units unbreakable and prevents their entities from dying for that duration. So that's a really nice ability, can help keep a unit alive, doing damage or holding the line, whatever's needed.
Ja, und hier hat er sein Greif-Sturmschwinge. Ja, sieht jetzt allerdings nicht so besonders aus irgendwie. Also,
Also has the option of a steed mount or the glorious Stormwing, as you can see. This does lower his melee attack and melee defense, but gives him armor piercing damage and a big charge bonus, attributes he was missing on foot. And let's be honest, you're going to keep him on Stormwing most of the time anyway. He also gains fear and terror and the mobility of being on a griffin type mount. So a nice melee lord with the magical options as well, although pretty damn expensive. And to the other new High Elf Lord, Prince
ja, jetzt kommen wir zum Free-LC und das ist Prinz Imrik, Drachenprinz Imrik. Ich finde, der sieht nicht so gut aus. Gleich kommt er mit Reittier, schauen wir mal weiter.
Imrik, the Lord of Dragons. On foot, he's pretty beefy in melee, lots of melee defense and melee attack, armor piercing weapon damage as well as anti-large, so he's going to be great at taking down those large lords. Great combat stats all round really. For his abilities, he's got Lord of Dragons, a 30-second hex, reducing enemy melee defense by 24 and melee attack by 40. So that's very helpful for taking down enemy characters, especially large ones. He also has Dragonhorn, a 16-second map-wide augment to himself and allies, which gives plus 24 melee attack and can cause fear. So a pretty beefy support ability there. And for an item, he has Star Lance, which is a 29-second augment to himself, imbuing fire damage, 25% armor piercing weapon damage, 20% charge speed, 50% charge bonus, and makes the enemies he's fighting flammable, giving them a 22% weakness to fire damage. For his mounts, he does have his own unique steed, but why would you want that when you've got Manaithnir, his unique dragon mount?
Hier sehen wir ihn jetzt mit der großen Lanze und auf seinem Drachen. Ja, sieht ein bisschen besser aus, aber irgendwie, weiß nicht. Irgendwie habe ich mir da ein bisschen mehr erhofft.
This mighty beast will imbue him with fire damage and give him enough weapon strength to make Daenerys Targaryen
Das sieht aus, als ob der gleich runterfallen würde.
shudder at a whopping 580, although he does lose his bonus versus large. But who cares? 580. Ridiculous. But I suppose you expect nothing less from the Lord of Dragons. This gives him some decent stat improvements, although a bit of a loss of armor. And of course you get the breath attack for roasting all your foes. And naturally, Imrik has plenty of fire resistance. So you've got some choice on how you use Imrik as an anti-large lord on foot or on a horse, or take him to the skies, put him on his dragon, and just destroy everybody. And to a whole bunch of new lords for the High Elves, the Archmage of all.
Ja, jetzt kommen wir zu den neuen Hochelfenkommandanten, und zwar das sind die Hochelfen-Magierinnen. Und hier sehen wir die Sturmvariante, also die haben auch alle unterschiedliche Farben.
Kinds of different lore books. Now they are just a wizard, so pretty crappy in melee, but they are your lord, so you can get a cheap combination of lord and caster with whichever lore book you like, and they've got a whole bunch of mount options: a steed, a chariot, an eagle, or a dragon if you so wish.
Ja, und die können auch auf einen Drachen reiten.
Their abilities and items are all about increasing magic recharge rate, but they do have one called Armor of the Stars,
Irgendwie finde ich, das sieht immer so aus, als ob sie gleich runterfallen.
which can give hiding, stalk, and unspottable to themselves for 67 seconds. Hidden Dragon, anyone? So it gives you the option to combine magic with a powerful dragon as your lord, something you couldn't do before. So that's a nice fresh option for the High Elves in the Lord department. And they've also gained some new mage heroes, the same ones they had before, but just with different lore books. They now have the Lore of Fire, the Lore of Death.
Ja, und hier sehen wir jetzt die Feuermagierin auf einem Drachen, und ich glaube, er sagt gerade, dass es alle Lore gibt für die neuen Kommandanten. Also alle Magie lernen, genau, richtige Wort.
The Lore of Metal and the Lore of Beasts at their disposal. And the Fire Wizard can actually be put on a dragon, so you can have a dragon caster hero if you like instead, although it's only for the Fire Wizard, which is apparently lore friendly. Now to some new High Elf infantry with the Rangers, dual sword infantry whose combat stats honestly aren't much better than Empire swordsmen, so why the hell do they cost so much? Well, that's because they have a physical resistance of 20%, probably coming from their dodge trait, which helps them avoid missiles as well. And they'll get Forest Strider, which will give them some bonuses when fighting in the forest.
Die sehen so ein bisschen aus wie Hochelfen-Anbeter des Kane, wegen der Doppelschwerter, aber ja gut. Und sie bekommen Bonus im Wald.
So they've kind of got some hidden talents, but a bit more of a cheaper damage dealer frontline option rather than spearmen. But whether they'll be able to hold up to that task is another question. Unless they're in the forest, then they may be able to do the job pretty well. But a nice new infantry with something a little bit different for the High Elves. And for another new infantry, the Silverin Guard. You know those cheap
Bei denen erkenne ich nicht, ob das weibliche oder männliche sind.
spearmen that you normally bring? Well, now you have an upgraded version if you want them. They're basically the same, a little bit better in the combat stats all round. They have a magic resistance and a charge defense against all. So they'll be able to negate all kinds of units' charge bonuses, helping them hold and survive that little bit
Ich glaube, das sind männliche.
better. So a pretty strong choice if you've got a lot of missiles you want to protect. These boys will do a far better job of it than the regular spearmen, and they don't
Ja, sind wohl männliche.
cost as much as Phoenix Guard. So it's a nice middle ground between those two. A great unit for holding the line or taking down those large enemies. And now to a regiment of renown, the Talons of Tor Khalida. These are basically the same as light armor archers, except they cause fire damage with their ammunition, and they'll give a debuff to the enemy that they're shooting at, causing it to have a 22% weakness to fire. So they
Sehr geil hier übrigens in Regiments of Renown. Reichweite 180 mit dem Bogen, und sie machen Feuerschaden mit ihren Pfeilen. Haben wir auch noch nicht.
going to put extra damage on whatever they shoot at. And now if you imagine that they shoot at something that already has a weakness to fire, i.e. regenerating units, well, that's nearly a 50% weakness to fire, which could be pretty devastating if they start blasting them down. Or if you team them up with Sisters of Avalon who have fire damage and do a shit ton of damage, well, you can imagine the results. A nice new raw unit. And speaking of raw, here's the Lion Chariots of Trace. Now honestly, it's very much the same as an Ithalmar chariot really, a little bit better in some stats, less armor though, but it does have armor piercing damage, which the Ithalmar chariot doesn't have, and it causes fear.
Ja, Weiße Löwen von Grace eben mit dem Streitwagen und sie haben es hier richtig umgesetzt. Hier sind auch wirklich die weißen Löwen drauf. Also ich meine jetzt hier diese Soldaten von Grace. Die gibt es ja auch so und die sind hier wirklich auch auf dem Streitwagen.
So gonna have the same job as a regular Ithalmar chariot, just a little bit better at it because of the armor piercing damage, and the fear is a nice touch as well. It also has some damage resistances. Now get rid of the chariot and
Und hier natürlich ohne Streitwagen.
you've just got War Lions of Trace, who are pretty freaking cool looking if I do say so myself. These are basically warhounds on steroids. Similar characteristics to them, very quick, light on the armor, but where they excel above warhounds is their mighty weapon strength, which is armor piercing and anti-infantry. Not to mention a beefy charge bonus as well, so missile units better watch out for these. They have a missile resistance and cause fear as well as Strider, so going to be great for running down all kinds of missiles, light or heavy. They could go to work on some cav as well with some support maybe. So a very nice disruptive and harassing unit with the War Lions. If you want a better version with a little more raw though, you could go with Rahagra's Pride, the Regiment of Renown version with some considerably increased stats and a new ability, Mighty Roar. This is an augment for 25 seconds, 40 meter distance. Any enemies within that zone will get -8 leadership and -25 speed. So that's going to help them catch anything they're chasing after. Great for catching skirmish cav and things like that, if you can pop that ability near them. That brings us to the skies with the Arcane Phoenix.
Den finde ich wunderschön. Der sieht gut aus.
Similar to the existing Phoenixes, but all stats are vastly improved. It has fire damage and magical damage on its attacks, as well as a physical resistance, a fire resistance, causes fear and terror, and is just an all-around nightmare in the sky. And for the abilities, Attuned to Magic, a constant ward save which will give magical damage and a 12% damage resistance, whilst mana is above 50%. Another one of its abilities, Fiery Rebirth. When it gets below 10%, it has a chance to use this ability, which will potentially give it health back and cause a massive explosion. Or it'll just die instantly. So a bit of a risky one, but potentially very powerful if you give this majestic beast half of its health back.
Also die können sich auch wiederbeleben, genau wie die normalen Flammenphönixe auch.
And if that wasn't enough, it also has Ember Storm, a vortex spell, which will cause magical and fire damage, in a similar fashion to a Pit of Shades. So overall, an absolute aerial behemoth. And guess what? It has a Regiment of Renown version, the Omen of Asurian, which is very much the same as the previous.
Wunderhübsch, nicht wahr? Also das ist echt ein sehr hübscher Phönix.
Phoenix with a few stat improvements, but most notably a new ability, Omen of Hope, which is a constant augment to all nearby troops, which gives an immunity to psychology. So that could be handy against those extra spooky factions, but overall, Stellar Nightmare in the sky, an absolute beast.
Also ich finde, der sieht echt mega krass aus. Da haben sie sich echt Mühe gegeben.
So there you go. All the new units for the Greenskins and High Elves in the Warden and the Paunch DLC.